Well, welcome back, everybody. It's Frank Dolan from Arsenal Advisors here with our next session. I get to introduce Mark Claremont, the CEO of Cecilia Health. Mark, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. You know, I'm really excited to talk about you, talk about the company. When I think about my career at 7 different biopharma companies, there were a lot of product launches along the way that were in diabetes. And I'll tell you, that's when I first heard about one of the early iterations of Cecilia Health. Now, the company's certainly grown and grown up quite a bit since then. And what you're doing is really innovative and compelling. But first, I want to start with you, though. You've recently arrived as CEO at Cecilia Health. First of all, congratulations. Tell us a little bit about your journey and why you're excited to be here.
Well, it's been quite a journey. I've been in healthcare for quite some time, in many different segments of healthcare, whether that's the health system side, point of care solutions. I am one of a small team of individuals who built a very successful point of care clinical decision support tool called UpToDate, which is now owned by Wolters Kluwer Health. And along the way, learned a lot of lessons through that, living through that growth cycle. So now happy to say that that's a program that's running successfully across the globe and helping physicians make better and more informed decisions. At the same time, you get exposed to a lot of the challenges of healthcare, which we all know oh so well. I migrated then into a company to run a company called Prevent Health. It's chronic disease management. Eventually sold that company to Quest Diagnostics. So a nice successful run there. Moved into healthcare IT, selling into payers and the pharma space, and eventually was introduced to the Cecilia team. It's a classic story, a company that was started by a gentleman named David Weingard, who later in his life was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and came across the very challenging aspects of being newly diagnosed, and then the ongoing challenges of living with and adapting to a chronic disease and living with that for the rest of his life. And so he founded the company, grew it to a point that that it started to make sense to turn the reins over to someone that has experience scaling business. For me, I saw a company that not only was I bought into the story, David's story, I was also bought into the story of Cecilia Health. But I also saw a unique scenario. So Cecilia Health, it's actually fairly unique in the sense that it's much more than a provider of chronic disease management services. On one hand, it's a virtual first provider organization that works with patients across all chronic disease risk profiles, starting with diabetes, but certainly has since expanded into many other chronic disease states. And on the other hand, we're a consumer engagement company. And so we have programs designed as extensions for health systems and health plans. But what really drew me to the company actually was the unique position to drive marketing and engagement programs in the pharma and device spaces. And there are a lot of interesting trends occurring in the marketplace, a lot of interesting complexities, and all of those exacerbated by the pandemic. I'm sure we'll get into some of this. But I saw a company in Cecilia Health, which is a tech-enabled solution. It provides medication adherence, therapy initiation, patient outcomes, while delivering unique data-driven consumer insights, and mainly targeted toward pharma and device space.
That is that's really cool. So I want to dig in a little bit more because I want people to feel like they really know why they would want to take action and learn more. Your average bio and pharmaceutical executive at even a relatively senior level is getting 42 solicitations a day from companies that claim that they are going to make them more money, save the world, who knows? So let's just explore a little bit. What's the secret sauce that makes Cecilia Health really special?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think the listeners know plenty of the stats. 6 in 10 people have at least one chronic disease. I think thinking positively, maybe 30% of them are aware that they have a chronic disease, which is a staggering number in and of themselves. But let's make the jump that these individuals are initially prescribed. We know that 50% of them at best are adherent after 1 year of going onto their therapy. And there's a cost to that. By different calculations, you're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of $250 million annually. And so we've learned a lot, however, in this time, and we've learned a lot in the sense that digital solutions initially were thought to be the next panacea to drive engagement. And here we are, a little older, wiser, and understanding that digital technologies by themselves are insufficient, and particularly for certain populations. And so what Cecilia does is we bring that human intervention, combine that with the digital engagement programs. And because we are also a provider organization, we're able to have a level of sensitivity and insight that I think most players are not able to have. And so that's where we really drive our patient data enrichment. And as a result, improved ROI. So 80% adherence after 1 year. That's a tremendous number compared to 50% in stats in the without any kind of intervention, and a 3x market return on programs. So those stats speak for themselves.
They sure do. They definitely get my attention when I think about. I was involved with several diabetes therapies in the past. All of them were as you'd expect, chronic therapies. And while we, as the brand matured, we did look at the number of months that our patients were technically on the medication. The number of months of therapy didn't equal this proclaimed duration that they had been on our drug. There are a lot of prescriptions missing. I kind of contrast that with the excitement I certainly have. I know a lot of my peers share when it comes to a lot of those digital technologies. But in many disease areas, there are those patients, I would have figured you would agree with this, that many of us in pharma call the unworried, unwell. So you may have a really whiz-bang digital tech that you're bringing forward, or an app. We hear about all of these incredible companies coming out of unique corners of the country and the globe. But if people aren't feeling engaged, there's going to be a gap. And so I'm really excited about what you guys are doing, especially with the human aspect of it, because I think that social tension can also help in the broader adherence equation. But before we get too deep, let's think about the big picture here. What's your view of chronic illness here in the United States, and what are the implications for pharma?
Well, it's interesting. It's the unworried, unwell. I think also with the pandemic, we also have a very worried unwell who have also begun to shy away from their treatments for a number of reasons, and so that's that compounds and confounds the pharma's ability to find and engage the right kind of patients for the right kind of therapy, let alone try to help them adhere. And we'll get into that. I suspect coming into because it just drives a few additional questions. But you think about some of the digital advances that we've had over the years, proliferation of digital health technologies. Here we are facing an aging population, including increases in chronic disease states and multiple comorbidities. I think the audience probably is well aware of the data that's now coming in, that nearly all chronic disease states, perhaps with the exception of asthma, has been exacerbated by the pandemic. I'd love to say that we all went out and exercised with the newfound time with not commuting, but that isn't necessarily the case. And so here we are, an aging population that's in worsening health. We need help more than ever, and we need engagement, and the tools with which we need to proactively get, especially those unworried, unwell eyeballs, to realize that they actually need some help, There are a lot of great technologies and human-driven technologies that can help bend that curve. We're living proof of that. So you also have new entrants, regulatory changes, which I think are threatening pharma's competitive advantage. So we need to think about new operating models, perhaps more robust data-driven approaches to engage healthcare practitioners. I think there's certainly a piece where our patients are having challenges engaging their own physicians, and hence we're seeing this uptick in virtual care, whether that's through video synchronous engagements or asynchronous engagements. I think also our ability as vendors to engage healthcare practitioners is also a challenge. And so I'm sure that's certainly no new revelation for folks, but that certainly has implications for program launches and initial therapy uptake. So if you look at this rapid pace of innovation, the need to develop these highly complex specialty molecules is creating challenges for patients to remain up to date on their medications. And so what we've seen in our day-to-day patient encounters is increased complexity for patients to even understand what is relevant for them to maintain their treatment. And when you then mix in scenarios of affordability and pandemic concerns, et cetera, it's just remarkably challenging. And so our programs, again, we talk about the human intervention when we have that face-to-face touch. And I'll give an example in a moment. When we have that face-to-face touch, you really can make a difference in that, especially in that initiation moment. And we've found that to be the creator of the greatest stickiness.
It's interesting to get outside perspectives. Here at Arsenal, we have 38,000 pharma and biotech executives that subscribe and participate in our musings and our experiences as we try to solve our own problems. So it's refreshing when we get an outside perspective of something that we think that we know really well. You mentioned some implications around, COVID-19. From your perspective, what are some of those implications and considerations for pharma based on what you guys do?
Well, I'll give I have a few examples that speak to myriad challenges. But you think about one of our customers is a multi-billion-dollar cardiovascular drug, and having challenges with transition of care, lifestyle adjustments, diet, exercise, et cetera. And so initially, that client engaged us to help at the moment of launch, and launch included initially a standard call center model utilizing your traditional call center agents. But what that resulted in, prior to coming to us, what that resulted in was limited personalization. It lacked clinical depth of engagement, so patient wasn't getting a meaningful conversation with respect to their heart failure treatment. Programs struggled to automate communications, limited segmentation, not necessarily data-driven, and so as a result, the program was experiencing this high drop-off rate, and that was suggestive of a few things, and perhaps this limited perceived value by patients, and so they experienced dwindling in adherence. And so fast forward, now we have a program. They engaged Cecilia to help to try to shift that curve, and this was prior to the pandemic. And there we plugged in automated call scheduling. We have a very deep bench of clinically trained experts, so we can provide a mix of non-clinicians and clinicians, when appropriate, of course, when warranted. Web-based analytics platform to help us understand in near real time what's happening, the types of data that we're capturing. These are all of these interactions enable a greater adherence and optimization of the program. And so here we are delivering tremendous results. we talk about, in that particular case, high patient satisfaction. So 98% of them believed that the 12-month program was highly valuable. You talk about it, that's a tremendous statement from a patient 12 months after therapy initiation. 98% felt that their Cecilia Health coach was knowledgeable about the drug program and other topics related to their condition. And 88% shared that they have a better understanding of their diagnosis as a result of the program. And so you talk about driving enrollment. In this case, optimization of enrollment was 100%. So that's an initial one example, and that's even a pre-pandemic example. So we could then launch into a pandemic scenario where it was saddened by one example, that patient conversation that we reviewed the other day, where an individual was thought they were using their insulin injector correctly, and thought they were doing that for 6 months, and yet were not feeling very well. They would speak with their primary care practitioner, and the primary care practitioner would consistently up the dosage, and yet the patient continued to feel poorly. And so eventually we were connected with that patient, and over the course of that video conversation in their home, again, these were individuals that were too afraid to go into the office, and we were able to very quickly indicate or see that the inside cap of that injector had not been removed. So this person was not injecting themselves with insulin for 6 months. And you think about the tremendous impact that could have had. Thankfully, it was not a negative outcome for that patient, but for the discomfort over a course of 6 months. But simply having that level of acuity, that level of visibility in working with a patient, and because they happened to be speaking with, at that time, an expert clinician, they were able to also stop that patient from immediately injecting themselves with a far too high of dose of insulin, and instead get them connected back to their primary care practitioner, get them on the right regimen, et cetera. This is something that never would have been picked up before. And so if you think about adherence to a program and even initiation, that individual stuck with it for 6 months, which is just an incredible thing. How quickly they could have just dropped off if they just weren't feeling well, they could have stopped using. And that's where this initiation would have cleared all of this up. So that's another, it really brings home, that particular example really brings home what it means for patients who are now faced with even more friction for them to engage in the use of their chosen therapy. And again, whether that's medication or device or a combination thereof.
One thing that we all really enjoy are these patient stories, and that is powerful. It brings, this business to life when you're able to change someone's life, have a real impact like that. That is very, very powerful. That's great, Mark. Let me ask you this question. You mentioned the word friction, and that kind of jumped into my mind actually earlier when we started to talk a little bit about data and insights that you all at Cecilia Health can derive. You also mentioned launch. Okay, I've launched lots of products, and the forecast, as my mentor always would say, is a portfolio of errors. We never really account for the real friction that's in the market in launching our medications. So our industry is famous for being data rich and knowledge poor. In the advent of all of the things that you are doing, of our move towards big data, how is Cecilia Health helping us in pharma, biotech, medtech, et cetera, become knowledge rich?
Well, you think about, I'll offer that. I'll answer that question through an example. This is another patient example that an individual had called in initially to the pharma call center, and then was referred to us because of they hit particular criteria, and started working with one of our coaches. And what was interesting The reason why the person called in was because initially was because they weren't feeling well and they felt that perhaps, and they were having a hard time reaching their physician. We later found out the reason why they were having a hard time reaching their physician is that they had lost their insurance, and changed and could not see the provider that initially prescribed their medication. But what was really interesting is that that person started to self-titrate their medication because of affordability concerns. Again, they had lost their job, therefore they had a change in life status as it relates to their health care, went on to one of the exchange programs, and yet here they were having a difficult time affording their medication. And once we were able to glean that in that conversation, well, sure enough, this particular program offered opportunities and program opportunities to help patients in need. And so we got them connected into that particular program. And now that person, thankfully, is feeling well again. They're taking their medications as they're supposed to. And knock on wood, I hope they're able to rejoin the working world and get more supportive health insurance for them. But I think the message is clear that having these types of communications, we would not have been able to identify that. And I'm not sure even a physician in the physician's office, we would have been able to identify that a patient was having that kind of challenge. But having these synchronous virtual first type of interactions, that brings us into the home, and people feel more comfortable sharing pieces of information. And how useful would that have been? As we capture some of that information, we categorize it, we include that on a de-identified basis into some of our algorithms and our scoring mechanisms. And that can help inform better patient engagement protocols as we are looking to be more proactive going forward.
That is fascinating. Maybe we can build on this partnership piece a bit. Help us understand, how does Cecilia Health partner with pharma and agencies?
Well, in a number of ways, and I think we spoke to a few of these a moment ago through the examples. We talk about our product portfolio: remote clinical coaching, remote patient monitoring. I guess you throw us in the bucket of telemedicine, and across multiple chronic disease conditions, whether that's cardiovascular, diabetes, respiratory. We do have a behavioral practice that is fine-tuned to work with the comorbidities related to certain chronic conditions. And so how do you work with us? We do a program. We work with the agency of record, along with the brand management team, and we identify process, and we look for areas where our programming, our proactive outreach, can make a difference in both the data collection components as well as the identification and outreach campaigning. From there, we can engage both our digital and human interventions, get those up and running, track them, start to report out on those data sets. And from there, that becomes a nice circular input from driving omnichannel program improvements. So data-driven segmentation, et cetera. And by the way, I should have mentioned we include the device integration too. So if there are other components that we can add into the mix in terms of data composition, it's just a remarkable time to be able to capture this level of insight. And frankly, we've only scratched the surface of making a difference for people in this context, and it's just getting better every day.
So getting better is a big part of 2021 for the biopharma industry, that's for sure. We've had conversations with others recently about where 2020 may have been the year of both the pivot and the pilot. 2021 and beyond is really going to have to be about performance. So, Mark, I want you to help us from a pharma executive's perspective. how should we be thinking about patient support programs? How should we be thinking about launch initiatives? How do we fend off our competition?
Well, I think, so first, now's the time to be investing and building out partnerships that can amplify patient support programs. As the resources have existed in a way, but they operate in a way today that they never have before. And so if you, I'm sure most folks on this presentation are already thinking about ways to invest in and modify and update and refresh their programs. This is the time to be doing it, especially as we're starting to come out of the pandemic and humans start to emerge and perhaps re-engage in truly more omni-channel means to engage with healthcare systems and engage with the self-management of their chronic disease states. So adherence ecosystems are the future. And that's where you can capture patients in a digital support web that provides them everything that they need, from access to prescribers, to financial support, to re-prescribing, ongoing expert clinical support. Pharmas that don't adapt to this new means of patient engagement or lack of personalized model I think will start to fall behind, and fairly quickly. This is moving faster than I've ever seen. We talk about healthcare in general moving at glacial pace, but there are some remarkable changes happening brought about by the pandemic, and I don't think this acceleration of change that we've seen in 2020. We certainly see that continuing in 2021, but now we're starting to bring the maturity of 12 months experience to the table, and quite an interesting set of changes coming, especially in the practice of medicine, especially in the availability of patient information, the availability of consent for patient information. We will finally have much more robust means as patients to allow additional insights to be made available to qualifying participants or qualified vendors, and so like Cecilia. And that it creates, as I said, even more enriched viewpoints on what motivates patients to adhere, to initiate, to adhere, and persist in their program.
So let's stay on the future and talk about the implications of digital care and pharmacy models on pharma.
Well, I think in digital care itself, there are a number of new rules in place. You'll hear a lot about e-notifications. You'll hear a lot about information blocking rules. You'll see a lot of change. We already have seen a lot of change in pharmacy, so with retail entrants. So brick and mortar is shifting. We've seen virtual PCPs emerge, and all of this, where there used to be this massive data moat in particular, surrounding health systems. There, 18 months from now, 24 months from now, we'll see a dramatic shift, and it will just emerge as the enforcement rules are kicking in this year. Just in a tremendous shift in the availability of information, patient-driven information. Now, there's still a lot of regulation wrapped around that, and that information is available only under certain contexts. But as that becomes available, companies like Cecilia can, because we bridge both the provider space and the marketing consumer engagement space, we can start to enrich our data models, and that can help work with your agencies to better inform the efficacy of different outreach programs, as well as report back on on how well those, not just the efficacy of the program overall in terms of driving positive outcomes, but also tweaking the model and see in much more effective and efficient ways how well those programs are modulating and landing within the specific marketplaces, regions, channels, et cetera. There's some really remarkable evolution happening over these next 18, 24 months.
Well, to be prepared for that, we're going to need great partners. So I guess I'm going to put you on the hot seat here, Mark. And I want to ask you, as a pharma organization, why do we want to partner with Cecilia Health?
Well, I think I touched on a number of these. You want to partner with us because where many companies have grown up as digital-only players. We, as patients, have proven time and time again that there is far too much friction introduced by digital-only strategies. So you need a player like Cecilia that knows how to not only navigate the digital side of the equation, but also where and how to inject the right kind of human intervention. And you'll even hear some vendors talk about plugging in human intervention, and perhaps in the context of non-clinical acuity. But where we have an organization that has really two segments to the business, there's just a remarkable time for a player like Cecilia to be in the best position to understand where patients are in their particular care journeys, understand where they are relative to their specific prescription initiation, fulfillment, refillment, et cetera. The level of visibility into this information and the fluidity of this information is ever increasing. And we're in a very good spot to be able to take advantage of some of the new data liquidity that's emerging. And so you want to work with us because not only do we have experience in delivering better outcomes with our tried and true programs, but these tried and true programs are now also being enhanced and improved with this new influx of liquid data that we're able to glean from our patient interactions.
Well, I mean, it's a high stakes environment right now. Every brand I've ever seen has talked about being patient centric. And the obvious outcome of being patient centric and having great partners and driving great patient outcomes is, we're delivering on that promise that we have, and patients live better lives. And especially in this data environment, if those are really driving incredible insights, then these patient support programs and the data pot of gold that kind of comes with it will help us operate, in a smarter way. And I do think that our environment when it comes to pricing, regulation, and beyond is only going to get more intense. So the more we demonstrate value with our brands, including how we're helping to impact patients, from a pharma perspective, it's an imperative for sure. This has been great, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, again, I appreciate you having me. Certainly, if anyone has questions, they can find us at ceciliahealth.com. We're on all the major social platforms, et cetera. Happy to sit down, talk about what we do, and explore how we could possibly help you.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. We're looking for innovations because we need to deliver on some very big goals for 2021 and beyond. So, Mark, congratulations on the CEO role at Cecilia Health. Congratulations to your team and the great work that you all are doing. Those examples were powerful, and we're excited to connect with you in the future.
Well, thank you. Thanks again for having me, Frank. Much appreciated.
All right. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everybody. We'll see you in the next session.